If you were to face an ancient Sith Lord in combat, you would learn that we are as children playing with toys compared to the prowess of the old masters.
When dealing with biology, you always find new things occurring within the genome. Anomalies and mutations, similar to, say, like Frieza from Dragon Ball, being a mutant, or even just Broly. Heck, there's actually a guy named Ronald Gaming who covers a lot of this kind of material, making his bread and butter to identify illnesses within movies and analyzing them. It's actually pretty interesting, so check him out every now and again, just to see if there's anything of interest, because it's actually pretty cool. But today, we're actually talking about one such anomaly. You see, within the Star Wars universe, mutations don't really cause that much difference until they do, such as Vitiate, when he was born with eyes as dark as the void itself, but went on to become one of the biggest menaces within the Star Wars universe. But instead, today we speak of an older Sith that I would call the greatest Sith Lord who has ever lived. More so than Palpatine, more so than Vitiate. And while not more powerful than them, it is upon his shoulders of whom the Dark Jedi exiles stood to form their empire and inspire the Sith Order for millennia to come. Here's a question that has to be asked. How does one become blessed by destiny? Is it a retrospective approach to one's achievements in life? Is it due to the movement of fate? Biology? Heck, I don't even know. But approximately 300 years before the formation of the Galactic Republic, around 28,000 BBY, a child was born on the planet Korriban. That was during the height of the civil wars among the ancient Sith, where city-states battled amongst one another in constant brutal conflict. But this child is considered a chosen being, one blessed by the dark side of the Force, for he was different from the start. Rather than possessing the brilliant crimson skin tone native to the ancient Sith, this child was dark like charcoal. Now, while among humans, different skin tones don't, or rather shouldn't matter, being a mutant among the ancient Sith denoted something special. As a result, this child was raised as such. That child was named Adas, and as he grew, it became clear that he truly was something extraordinary. He became substantial in size, which requires some context. So, the Kasai and the Zukaru were approximately the size of a standard human, between 5'5" and 6'1", while the Massassi, the warrior caste of the Sith species, was nearly 8 feet tall. So when I hear the word substantial, that likely means that Adas was Massassi sized, with greater intellect and exceptional skill in combat. But where he truly shined, however, was in Sith sorcery, in which he was particularly gifted. Adas would forge a suit of spiked ebony armor, and armed himself with 2 oversized alchemically forged battle axes. Of course, that also requires context, because while sources say alchemical, Sith alchemy wasn't something that emerged until millennia later, after the arrival of the Dark Jedi exiles. So it's more accurate to describe this weapon as enchanted. Yeah, we're going straight fantasy with this. This is Star Wars, you knew what you were getting into. Armed thus, Adas embarked on a journey that all worlds of Korriban faced, entering the planet's eternal conflagration. Now, to say that the planet was war-ridden would be an understatement of galactic proportions. Due to the dark side's presence fueling the native species, the Sith were always in some state of civil conflict between nation states. Unlike other worlds, where such conflicts were isolated, on Korriban they were occurring everywhere and all the bloody time. Quickly, they were fortunate their warfare remained relatively primitive. Had advanced technology like nuclear weapons been introduced, well, the Sith would have bombed themselves into oblivion within a year, turning their world into radioactive dust. Yet, despite this technological limitations, the Sith tried their best anyway. And from this stage, Adas took his axe to the disparate nations and tribes of his home world, and through a brutal series of campaigns, he tore through them like a tidal wave. His forces grew larger and stronger until, for the first time in the species' history, the Sith were actually united. This had been a literal impossibility prior to his rise. Because of this unprecedented event, Adas became king of the Sith, and founded the very first kingdom of the Sith, a kingdom whose rumors would last for millennia, all the way into the Second Great Skirmish in 7,000 BBY. This era would become known as the Reign of the Axe, which began in 28,000 BBY. For 300 years, Adas reigned, outlasting even the normal lifespan of a Sith, which typically ranged from 120 years to 200 years. It was believed by the people that his reign would be eternal. and he came to be revered as a god by the general populace, as brutal fighting had finally ceased. But the reign of the Axe was not bloodless. Oh, not even by a long shot. The dark side never allows stagnation. Others, of course, faced challengers, fools who believed themselves powerful enough to challenge what they perceived as a god. And as one spiky-haired warrior once said,
"And what is a god to a non-believer?"
oh god, that's the answer, which is pretty dumb that that's even a question. His rebellion, challenger, or self-deluded fool was laid low with a single swing of his mighty axes. If they had proved themselves to be true rival warriors rather than schemers and cowards, Atlas would honor them by drinking their essence, taking them into himself, and growing even stronger. He was an inflexible ruler who embodied many of the Sith's most ancient rites and customs. He preyed upon the timid, enslaved those he deemed foolish, destroyed idealists who sought change that might weaken their people, and he hated weakness. These traits made him feared long after his death, for millennia, and left him unrivaled. He was given the moniker of Sith'ari, meaning Overlord, a title that all Sith would later attempt to claim for themselves, only to be found wanting. But all things must eventually come to an end. Well, you see, Odyssey's reign had actually caused something that the dark side could never abide: stagnation. He had become an immovable bastion of power. In time, attempts on his life ceased altogether. The Sith stopped their forward momentum growing dependent upon him. Despite Odyssey's advanced age of 300 years, there was no sign of weakness or even decline. He was a mountain that needed to be crushed for the Sith to become more than they already were. And so the wheels within the galaxy turned. In 27,700 BBY, the Force Hounds of the Rakan Infinite Empire, Force Hounds servants who were tattooed with the Arabesque symbols upon their faces and bodies, and trained to sense a world with strong Force populations, discovered a dark side nexus unlike anything they had ever encountered. Intrigued, the Rakan Masters moved to secure the planet. But upon inspection, they did not find a world in chaos, but one wholly under the control of a singular, powerful being. They decided influencing a single man would be easier than trying to conquer the entire world. They presented Odyssey with a gift: a holocron. How this was meant to earn his confidence is rather unclear, to be entirely honest. More likely the device resembled a Rakan mind trap, intended to capture his will by recording his essence. And while Odyssey was intrigued, he did not use it. Instead, he dismantled it, played its inner workings, and created his own, the first Sith holocron. And it didn't serve as a teaching device, instead as a testament to his achievements. Seeing through the Rakan deception, Odyssey led them on for an unspecified period of time, drawing the attention of a Rakan praetor named Soa. Now you see, Soa claimed to be a warlord, had conquered 1,000 worlds in the service of the Infinite Empire. Among those worlds formerly under his control was Korriban, hence his declaration.
"For I ruled 1,000 worlds, and Korriban was my crown, Korriban my cradle, and my testing ground."
But that was not a claim Odyssey accepted. When Soa realized the king would not submit, only one outcome remained: invasion. But while Odyssey strung the Rakata along, Soa had made subtler advances that went unnoticed. He gathered a group of Sith purebloods, likely offered as tribute, whose minds were broken and shaped into slaves and spies. Particularly Yishar Kale, the so-called betrayer of Odyssey. The truth was revealed. Fury consumed the Praetor, and an invasion was launched, not to elevate the Sith as favored vassals, but to punish them for their defiance. But Odyssey was ready. He had gathered a massive army upon the fields of Korriban as the Rakatan forces surged forward with their Force-based technology. Annihilation Walkers, monstrous beasts, and traitorous Sith who sided with Soa. Against that, the primitive pureblood warriors seemed impossibly outgunned and outnumbered. Yet the faith of the Sith was unbroken as they chanted their leader's name: Odyssey, Odyssey. Each cry fed their resolve. For the first time in 300 years, peace ended and the dark side feasted once more. The Rakata, prideful rulers of the galaxy, had underestimated what awaited them. As one, the Sith descended. Personally, Odyssey slew dozens of Rakan warriors, leading a defense unlike anything that has ever been seen or sensed in Sith history. A charge that would leave him wounded, but yet he pressed on, even as his court magician was captured and imprisoned within a Rakatan mind prison. Sith forces captured Rakatan starships, tore out their pilots, turned the vessels against their former masters, and with them the Sith drove the Infinite Empire from the Stygian caldera forever, pushing Soa into madness until he was eventually sealed away on Belsavis after his rebellion against the Infinite Empire. With victory secured, the ancient Sith were finally free of their homeworld, expanding to Zios, Malachor, Hund. But Odyssey's wounds were grave. Even his master of Sith sorcery could not heal him at such an advanced age. And so King Odyssey died, a warrior, a god, a true Sith. Unfortunately, without him, Korriban fell right back into civil conflict, many claiming the title of Sith'ari, but none matched his might. The conflict grew so severe that the Sith abandoned Korriban, relocating their capital to Zios and designating their original homeworld as a monument to their fallen king. Though the Sith Kingdom eventually stabilized into the old Sith Empire, its foundations were built upon Odyssey's legacy. Some, among the Kasai, fractured into schisms. One group rejected the dark side entirely, embracing the concept of unity, that all life is force sensitive and that no true opposites exist. They fled Sith space and became the sorcerers of Tund. Others believed Odyssey was the only true Sith'ari. Still, more believed in a prophecy that a perfect being would one day arise and claim the title fully. A prophecy that many Sith would try to claim they fulfilled, that they become stronger than ever only to be destroyed. But this had only been nothing more the end of the Sith, and it began with a Junta Paul being declared as the blood heir to King Odyssey, that ultimately doomed the Sith as a people, reducing them from a culture into an order that would lose its roots. For Odyssey was the greatest of them all. It doesn't matter the accomplishments or powers of those who came after, because the very name Sith is something he forged, a name that strikes terror from the ancient past to the distant future of the Star Wars universe.